Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jazz. This is Travels in Fiction. Happy March. In February, I managed to read so many books. The most amount of books I feel like I've ever read in the shortest month. Very strange. So this is going to be a longer wrap up than usual, but you know, grab a cup of tea. I hope you enjoy. Before we head into it, I'm going to give you some stats. To be honest, I've been thinking about this all month, just like kind of mulling how I want to do my stats. I think I'm going to change the way I do some of them because I think tracking queer authors just sits funny. It just sits funny in me, and it makes me feel like a tiny part that it's pressuring some authors. I mean, I don't think there are authors watching this video, but it's like contributing to like the idea that you have to be out if you're writing queer stories, and I just don't like it. So I'll probably still track it if they're like openly out on my spreadsheet, but I just don't think I want to put them in the video, if that makes sense. And I'll like talk about it throughout the wrap up anyway. Just, yeah, I don't know. I hope that makes sense. So I think I'm just going to, in the stats part, like how many queer books I read in terms of like queer characters and like main characters, and we'll go from there. I don't know, I'm also sort of struggling I'm also thinking like in terms of gender, like the same thing sort of applies. Like if someone's questioning their gender but they're not out yet, or like they're just kind of questioning it, or like they have different pronouns but they haven't like necessarily specified like a particular identity. I don't know, I just don't want to be like perpetrating, like I don't want to put someone in a box if like they don't want to be in a box. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. I'm gonna give you some stats here and continue to mull, because the thing is I was like putting off making this intro because I was like trying to work out what to do, but I don't know what to do, so I'm going to just do the stats without the parts that I'm not sure what to do in, and we'll continue to think about it because you can't just make snap decisions. And I'll continue to think about it in March. So if you have any thoughts, like let me know, but it's not that deep. I mean, gender and identity is quite deep, but like this specific issue about whether to put them in my stats or not isn't that deep. Anyway, I hope that wasn't too rambly. I just want to be honest, like, yeah, anyway. Right, here are some stats for you regardless, and then we'll head straight into the wrap up. Okay, so in February I read 10 books. I know. That was a total of 2,422 pages and 11 hours of listening time. So for the format, I read 7 print books, 1 ebook and 2 audiobooks. Okay, so my TBR at the start of the month was 105, and my TBR at the end of the month, it's 110. I bought some books, I realised I hadn't included a few books on my original spreadsheet list, so I had to add those. So yeah, it's gone up. I enjoyed the book shopping. Let's move on. Okay, so in terms of fiction or non-fiction, I read 7 fiction books and 3 non-fiction books. Okay, and then in terms of authors, I read 8 authors of colour this month and 2 white authors. Okay, and then the last category, the queer book section, I read 4 books that feature queer main characters. Or in terms of if it's a non-fiction, it's a book that focuses on like queer identity. So that is my stats. That's what we're going with for now. I know that I said I wanted to be able to compare, but you know, no. We're going with this, and I will assess and continue to think about what I want to do in terms of the stats. But for now, let's head into the very first book. I hope you enjoy, and I will see you at the end of the video, or next, because that's still me. Okay, stop talking. Goodbye. Hello. Hi, welcome to the first book review. I am freezing today, so I have a nice cat book blanket on. I'm just gonna wrap it up a bit more actually, I'm so cold. Okay, so the first book I read this month, I finished on the 1st of February, so I'd basically read it all in January, and that is My Grandmother Sends Her Regards and Apologies by Fredrik Backman. This one is translated from Swedish, and in the US, funnily, it's actually translated as My grandmother asked me to tell you she's sorry. It's really interesting with Fredrik Backman's books, they always seem to be translated differently in the US and the UK. But anyway, I digress. I had very complicated feelings about this book. I firstly was buddy reading this one with Jo from Joannotations. Be sure to go and check out her channel. And it was really lovely, but then I kind of fell behind reading it because I was struggling so much to get into it, which I felt sad about because I love Fredrik Backman. I would say he's like one of my favourite writers, and I'm hoping this is a blip. So this book is about a young girl called Elsa. At the beginning of the book, her grandmother dies. So her grandmother has left her like an adventure to go on, and this adventure is kind of like all about finding these letters in which her grandma is apologising for things to different people, and in turn Elsa starts speaking to everyone that she knows in her life, in like her neighbours, and getting a sense of actually who they are, how they're connected to her grandma, and also who her grandmother actually was in like the life before she was her grandma. So it's a really interesting book. Okay, let's start with the good things. So I really enjoyed Fredrik Backman's writing. I love Fredrik Backman's writing. So even though half of this book I was like struggling, his writing is so beautiful. As we go throughout, each character gets way more depth, and the ways they're acting, and you might be like, oh, that's really frustrating, like they're an annoying character. You see why they're acting that way, and Fredrik Backman's books always do that, and I love it for that. I also really enjoyed kind of how throughout it explored dealing with death when you're a young person is very different to dealing with death as an adult. Like, for example, like her being really angry that she had, like, that her grandma had a past life, and like feeling really jealous that her grandma did things when it's like, no, she was my grandma, she was my grandmother. It's like a really interesting kind of route to explore. So the actual like story I really loved. However, like, this book is narrated by Elsa. I did struggle a little bit in terms of her being a child. It's very different from like A Man Called Ove and Beartown in terms of the narration. But also throughout this book there are like fairy tales throughout that her grandma used to tell her, and on the one hand I did find them really interesting because as you go throughout the book you see that like all of the fairy tales that her grandma has been telling Elsa, they're like inspired by real people, and so as she goes throughout the book she kind of meets the people that inspired the fairy tales, which was a really lovely story. However, I kind of just didn't care about the fairy tales, and that makes me feel like a Scrooge because literally throughout the book Elsa was like, adults don't care about fairy tales, and I was sat here like, oh my god, I don't care about the fairy tales. I am the adult in this situation, and I just like, I wanted to love them so much and I didn't. I feel sad that I didn't like them, basically, because so many other people have been like, it was a really nice like way to go back into the mind of a child and childhood, and I do agree, but I also kind of like very much skimmed when Elsa was directly telling the fairy tale of what happened, and then as soon as we'd come back into the real life I was like, hey, I'm back into it, I'm loving it. So I'd love to know what you thought if you have read it, and also especially in comparison to Fredrik Backman's other books. So that was the first book, and I am intrigued to see what I read next, because I don't know. I just don't know. On to the next one. Okay, I've got two books to talk to you about. Let's talk about this one first. So, I finished this yesterday on the 6th of February, and this is Love in Colour by Bolu Babalola. Oh, I really enjoyed this book. This book is a collection of short stories, and it's like mythical tales from around the world retold. Each story is re-centred to centre the woman in the narrative, and it was really interesting reading Bolu Babalola's author note at the end, because she spoke a lot about how a lot of the original tales were really misogynistic, really rooted in the patriarchy, racist, sexist. And so it's really interesting to see how she took these tales and kind of took elements of them and shone light on different things to like centre these women, specifically black women. And I really enjoyed it. It was so interesting and so lovely. So with a short story collection, obviously you're not going to love every single one, but really, I loved most of them. Specifically, I really enjoyed Shahrazadeh. I'm not sure that I've said that right, but that was inspired by 1000 Nights. I really enjoyed that story. I really enjoyed Naleli's story and Nefertiti's story. Oh, I'm like looking at this now, like I enjoyed them all. I really enjoyed Yar's story. I honestly loved all of them. Also, at the end, there is a story that is based on Bolly Babalola's parents, which was so lovely. Each story was so like focused on a different thing, but like the romance was really evident, and it's very flowery in terms of like the love, and it's just so clear the like amount of love that went into this, and then the love that kind of shines through in each story. I loved it. So if you're thinking about picking this one up, I really would recommend that you do. And then no transition, but wait, I'm gonna try and do a transition. Today I finished Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Bayron. I read this for the Queer No Fear readathon hosted by Tasmin and Molly. I'm currently doing, but by the time that you see this, I will have posted, theoretically, my vlog of the readathon, so you can check that out where you can kind of see me document my thoughts throughout. But I loved this so much. I was kind of vaguely hesitant because I am not very good at fantasy, and I don't, saying that I don't read a lot of retellings, and it's like a retelling and a retelling. I don't know that I know my reading taste anymore, but I don't read that many retellings usually, but clearly I enjoy them. Like, that's clearly evident from this wrap up, isn't it? Anyway, Cinderella is Dead is a retelling, and it's basically set 200 years after Cinderella dies. We follow Sophia. Everyone knows the story of Cinderella, and every year everyone has to attend a ball, and all the women have to go and get chosen by men. Sophia does not want to be chosen by a man. She would much rather be with a girl. That's the start of the story, and oh my god, it was just so adventure fueled. Very much at the beginning felt like a dystopian, and then felt a bit more fantastical, fantasy-esque, I guess, as we went through, and I loved every second of it. I gasped like 20 times reading this book. Like, the twists and turns, I saw a few of them coming, but like not most of them, and I think it's just so good, and the message is so clear and evident and excellent, and the way that it twisted Cinderella's story into this story, and it's so dark, and it made it so dark and interesting and question things. I loved it. I would really recommend you read this book if you haven't. So those are the two books that I've read this weekend. What a good little haul. See you in the next one. Oh, it's bright there. Just gonna stay away from the weird hotspot. Hi, okay, I am coming to talk to you about I'm Afraid of Men by Vivek Shraya. This is one I finished a few days ago now, but I've been honestly just kind of like digesting it over the past few days, and I think I'm gonna continue to digest it over the coming like months. But I wanted to give you my wrap-up thoughts. So I read this one on audio as part of the Queer No Fear readathon. I will link my vlog up above if you'd like to watch it. I listened to this one on audio, and it was an hour and a half long, so it's a very short memoir, and it's a memoir that focuses on Vivek Shraya's experience as a trans woman and why she's afraid of men in various different ways, and how experiences from growing up before she transitioned, before she came out as trans, how those experiences have shaped who she is now. The whole conversation was so interesting. It's interesting because some things I can very much relate to in terms of being a woman, but then I'm a cis woman, so there was obviously quite a lot that was really interesting to hear about from her perspective. It opened up a lot of conversations I've not really considered before. Like, for example, there was like a section where she spoke about kind of setting boundaries with gay men and other members of the LGBTQ+ community. Like, I think in the book, her example was like she didn't want to give out her phone number and gave out an email address, and the experience of setting that boundary and then people being like why are you being so pretentious, you don't even want to give me your phone number, and kind of that idea of like setting boundaries is like unqueer, and she discussed how that's really interesting because the idea of being queer is so much associated with freedom that setting boundaries, people can like automatically can kind of consider that to be anti-queer, which was such an interesting conversation. It's not something I've thought about before, and so that was a particular thing that's continued to like mull in my brain. Yeah, overall, I would highly recommend this memoir. Thank you to Sean, sorry I forgot to say, for the recommendation from Caffeine and Commas. Definitely go and check her out, she's wonderful. There's so many things I could continue saying about this memoir. So short but punchy, like legit an hour and a half, and I'm still thinking about it days and days later. It's really interesting to hear more from Vivek Shraya. I've read the subtweet by her, which is fiction, and this is obviously a memoir, so it's interesting also to compare the two. Overall, read this book. It was 5 stars for me. I absolutely loved it, and I feel like I'm going to be thinking about it kind of all year. Do you know those kind of books? Like, I love it. On to the next one. Okay, hi. I have my hot water bottle here because I'm really cold, and it's just arrived. That's really exciting and warm, so I'm just going to cuddle it as I give my review. So this is Tin Man by Sarah Winman. Shout out to Amy from Amy's Bookshelf because she's lent me this book and I've had it for, I don't know, 8 months. So I finally got round to reading it. It is so short, it is less than 200 pages. And in this book we follow Ellis and Michael and Annie, and it's kind of hard to explain the plot actually because it's not a plot-based book. It's very much character-driven and it's not really like a lot happens. It's more like we're looking at Ellis and Michael and Annie and their history and their connections and how they know each other. I think I found the first 40 or so pages quite difficult to get into. I was a bit like, I'm not getting it. Oh my god, 40 pages in a less than 200 page book is quite significant. But I think past that mark, I just suddenly became hooked, and I read the rest of it basically in one sitting. And it was really lovely. I loved every single character very like separately and also together as a unit, and like the way that Ellis and Michael's relationship was like shown, and like the love there was so tender and so beautiful, and I think that's something that was really stressed really nicely in this book, the way that men deserve beautiful things too, and like men deserve to be able to cry and to cry happy tears and to be sad and to experience the whole range of emotion that is given if you're a woman. And I found that exploration really beautiful. It's a historical fiction, and it kind of flicks between times, but it is set partly in the 1960s in the UK, and it explored the way in which HIV and AIDS affected specifically men in the LGBTQ+ community at that time, and kind of the stigmas and stereotypes as well. Overall, like, this book was so beautiful. Like, the language was stunning. It was like a genuine joy, but like a sad joy to read. I'm really excited to read more of Sarah Winman stuff. She also wrote When God Was a Rabbit, which I've been meaning to read, so definitely will be reading that. I will have to borrow Amy's copy. Thanks, Amy, in advance. I'm sure that's fine. Yeah, so highly recommend this one. Really glad that I've finally finished it. And on to the next one. Hi. Okay, so no book, but I thought maybe it might be fun each month to take a little prompt from my prompts jar, which is something I made when I was gonna make a TBR game before truly accepting that I'm a mood reader. I thought it'd be fun if I just maybe did one a month occasionally when I'm feeling in the mood for something spontaneous. I can take a prompt from the jar and then just incorporate it into the wrap up, and then the next one you'll see will be this book, and then we just continue onwards with the wrap up. So that's fun. I think it's fun. Okay, I'm gonna pick one. Ah! Okay, the prompt is: read a book with blue and green on the cover. Blue and green. Interesting. Okay, I'm gonna think about this. I guess you'll find out in the next clip what book I chose. Bye. Hello, okay, so I thought I'd just frame my fake fire. So this is the book I picked for with blue and green on the cover. So you've got like lots of blues and greens. It's a very pretty cover. It's a very pretty book. This is My Friend Fear by Miralee Patel, which is a non-fiction self-help, mental health-esque art book. And it's one I was gifted from Penguin Platform during the Penguin Platform Christmas party in 2019. I've never really got to it because I've never really known when to read it, but it felt like a really perfect opportunity, and I literally just read this all today. It's Saturday, It's Saturday the 13th of February, happy Galentine's Day, and it was a really nice reflection. So it's very much focused obviously on fear. I don't think it brought anything new to the conversation, but I really enjoyed the way that Miralee Patel spoke about fear and anxieties and the ways in which she has like tackled her own in like specific ways, and it kind of resonated with me a lot because I have social anxiety, and so certain situations which have very, very irrational fears, don't know where I was going with that. The way that she spoke, about irrational fears really resonated with me because I'm very aware that the fears that I have in relation to my social anxiety. One, also social anxiety can be so different for so many people, just as like obviously people know this, but like it's not just like I'm afraid to talk to people, because that's not even it for me really. But anyway, just an interesting side note. The way that she spoke about irrational fears and how you can be very aware that they're irrational, and kind of analysing like what the root of the fear is was really interesting. It really took me back to my cognitive behavioural therapy days. It was really interesting to kind of reflect on what I'd learnt during CBT with this book. It was really interesting. So I don't think it was groundbreaking. I gave it 3.5 stars. I will show you the art style because it is stunning. I've decided I'm going to do a flick through overlay because I was like, I didn't know how to show you. Yeah, that was a fun little short read, fun little prompt. Maybe I'll do another one at some point. On to the next book. I am so excited that I've read this book. Okay, I finished this yesterday evening in bed, which was the 18th of February. I am truly like powering through with books at the moment. Like I am loving reading. What a great feeling. Like, and actually, this book, I read half of it yesterday, genuinely, like, and it gave me the vibes of like falling in love with reading again, and it was just the most wonderful experience. So this is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the first in the Brown Sisters trilogy. I don't know if that's the official name, but that's kind of what I call it in my head. And so the second one is Take a Hint, Danny Brown, and the third one is Act Your Age, Eve Brown. It is an adult romance, and that isn't something I would like usually gear myself towards, but I really wanted to read it because one, I'd heard amazing things, and two, this book especially, the main character Chloe has fibromyalgia, which is not something I have ever read in a book before, and my boyfriend has fibromyalgia, and I've just never seen a character, like a main character with it, and especially like in a romance, like, oh, so good. I'll talk about that in a second. And then the cherry, you know, on top for reading it in February is that it's my best friend Amy's pick for her February book club. Amy's book club pick for February, oh my god. So yeah, I'll leave that below if you wanted to find out more. It's very sexual, and I loved that. Like, I didn't know that I was gonna, but I did. It was like really well done and like really fun, and yeah, just great. I loved that. I really enjoyed the fibro representation. I don't have fibro, so I obviously can't comment on it 100%, but it was really interesting to read, especially living with someone that has fibro. I can definitely see a lot of similarities, some differences too, obviously, but I think that representation was really interesting and really great to see, especially in a romance where like Chloe is the main character and we get to see her living her life with fibro and the ways that it affects it, but also the ways it doesn't, and especially like because it is so focused on sex as well, that focus on like sex and disability together I feel has so often been erased in fiction, so I loved to see that. I also really liked learning about Red, and especially the focus on men's mental health, especially with the focus of like Red going to therapy and like him and Chloe like just within a conversation like talking about therapy. Like I loved it. I loved the communication in this book. I also really enjoyed the way that like their insecurities would sometimes get in the way of their relationship and of their like growing relationship. So realistic, like so realistic. It wasn't just like, oh, this communication has got in the way, which is literally like the worst trope ever. It was like, no, this like deep-rooted insecurity of mine is getting in the way and I'm aware it's getting in the way, but it is getting in the way. That's more realistic for like real life. That's a thing, that happens. But anyway, sorry, that was just me like ranting again about miscommunication. Yeah, I'm so excited to read Danny Brown, especially bisexual. Yes, I'm so happy that I read this book. I'm so happy that I read it. I'm so happy that I read this book. On to the next one. Hello, disclaimer, yes, I'm wearing a Christmas jumper. No, I will not take any comments at this time. Okay, I have just finished, literally just finished, like a minute ago, The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. It is the 21st of February. I'm powering through books this month. I am loving reading. And I love that. I am late to the hype on this book. I mean, it had been on my radar for so long and I just hadn't got a copy yet. But I bought a copy the other day and I wanted to read it immediately because it is Sarah and Sophie from the Little Contemporary Corners book club pick for February. And I'm so glad that that was like the push for me to read it. Not that there was anything stopping me, but like it took me a while to finally get to it. And it is just absolutely amazing. It's a novel in verse. It literally took me like a day and a half to read. Like I read half of it yesterday and the rest of it today. Like so quick. There are also illustrations throughout, which is really beautiful. They are by, I believe, yeah, Anshika Colour, and that was a really lovely experience. I would also really love to listen to the audio, which is also narrated by Dean Atta. So I think this is definitely one that I'm going to have a reread of and maybe listen to the audio at the same time as reading back through it. I think that'll be a great experience. This book follows Michael as he is growing up and figuring out who he is, and we kind of go through childhood, through teen years, and then into uni. The whole book is very much focused around identity and Michael trying to figure out where he fits in this world. He's trying to figure out his sexuality and his place being both black and gay, and specifically being mixed because he is Jamaican and Greek Cypriot. And so it was really interesting. There was a really beautiful quote actually that explored that very well. He says, "I feel like Goldilocks trying to find a group of people, the perfect fit for me, a group that's just right. I didn't feel black enough for African Caribbean society. I didn't feel Greek enough for Hellenic society. I didn't feel queer enough for LGBT society. But I've got to find a group that's just right for me." I guess that quote kind of like shows where the book progresses and where Michael progresses and like where he finds his place in drag. I've never read a book that focuses on drag. I've read a book where there are some drag side characters, but this is like front and centre, and it's so beautiful and such a lovely like exploration of like fitting in and gender and what drag means to different people and like how it can intersperse with gender or not, and like your sexuality, and like the whole conversation was so interesting. Oh, and just beautiful. I could talk for ages about this book. So basically, I loved this book. Like I am on a train of 5-star reads and like I'm very excited about it. So please go read this book if you haven't already. So that is me. Now, I'm not too sure what I'm gonna read. I think I'm gonna do another jar. I didn't think I was gonna fit in another jar pick in February, but here we are, back with the TBR jar. So let's pick a prompt. Okay, the prompt is a book with 2 authors. Okay, no idea what I'm gonna pick. We'll soon see, I guess. Hi. Okay, so I have 2 books for you today. I finished them both yesterday. Crazy. So I finished them both yesterday, which was the 25th of February. There was 1 ebook and 1 audiobook. So let's start with the ebook. Okay, so this book I actually read on my phone because I borrowed it from my library and then quickly realised I couldn't send it to my Kindle. That's a whole other video in itself, but I wanted to read it, and the actual format of the book was quite article-ish, so it felt actually quite nice to read on my phone. It like kind of took me away from the doom scrolling. So I'm thinking about reading more books on my phone. Anyway, I digress. The book is Taking Up Space by Chelsea Kouachi and Ore Agumbi. Hi, I forgot to say that Taking Up Space was the prompt for 2 authors. I had already started reading it and then it got returned to the library. I just completely forgot to explain this. And so I was waiting for it to come back, and the day after I picked that prompt, I got it back. It was like literally meant to be. So I read Taking Up Space for the prompt, read a book with 2 authors. And back to jazz. So this is a non-fiction about higher education in the UK, universities, specifically through the eyes of Chelsea and Ore, who are 2 black women who graduated from Cambridge. So it very much talks about being a black woman in a very white space, in a very white privileged space. It's split into lots of different sections. There's sections on mental health, there's sections on taking up space and kind of like education statistics and history, I guess, and talking about like the lack of black teachers in the UK and black lecturers. It talks about like the statistics of how many black people go to Cambridge and go to Oxford, and kind of the myth that the universities will say like it's because they're not applying, but like that's not really the case. But even if it's partly the case, there's a whole systemic reason for why that's happening. It talks about like inaccessibility, barriers to entry. It talks about relationships and all kind of within like the university setting. It talks about societies and how they can be both exclusionary but inclusionary at the same time. It really lets you see the UK educational system through their eyes and what the consequences of this current system is, and I would really recommend it. I honestly think it should be essential reading, and especially if you've gone to like a UK university, I would highly recommend picking this one up. Okay, and then the second book I read was my audiobook, and that was Let Me Hear a Rhyme by Tiffany D. Jackson. I love Tiffany D. Jackson's books, and this one was no different. I think I liked it slightly less than I liked Allegedly and Monday's Not Coming, but I still really enjoyed it. So this one is triple narrated. What's that called? It's narrated by Jarell, Quadir and Jasmine, and in the audiobook we had 3 narrators, and I loved that. Really solidly puts you in each character. And right at the beginning of the book we find out that Jasmine's brother Steph has been killed. Steph was also Jarell and Quadir's best friend, so we kind of go from there, and it very much explores grief, but there's also like mystery element as well in terms of like what's happened to Steph, and then as well as that, really like the main focus of the book is all about music. So Jasmine, Quadir and Jarell basically take it upon themselves. They get Steph's music and they try and make him into a major rap star, and so that is kind of the like basis plot of the book. What I love most about Tiffany D. Jackson's writing is the characters. Every book I read from her, the characters are so 3-dimensional, and so I care so deeply for all of them. They always have such unique voices, and just one of my favourite parts, as well as like the mystery elements. But I think this book it explored so many interesting things. It kind of interwove, the grief was really interwoven in, as well as like developing relationships, and it was really kind of funny at times, but then really like sad and heartbreaking at other times. And it was a really well-rounded book. And then the like mystery element, I don't think the mystery element was as big as her other books' mystery elements are, but it was definitely there as you're trying to work out what has happened to Steph. And there's also kind of growing tension as well about the fact that like they're keeping this big secret from everyone. So it was really good. I really liked it. I think I only have 1 Tiffany D. Jackson book left now to read, which is Grown, so super excited. So yeah, those are the 2 books I've just most recently read. Will we have another one in February? Maybe, maybe not. Time will tell. Bye. Way! Yeah, no, that was the last book I read. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you did, and let me know if any of these books you've read or on your TBR. I would love to have a little chat with you down in the comments. If you're here and you watch to the end but you don't really feel in the commenty space, that's totally chill. Just leave me a little donut emoji, because like I'm really hungry, and that'll make me very happy. Yeah, thank you again. I love making my wrap ups. They're one of my favourite videos to like make, even though they are always the kind of video that don't do particularly well, whatever well means, but like they're literally my favourite. So I hope that you enjoy, and I will see you in a new video. Bye.